Director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle left behind a story that now demands a painful look back at what he once shared. I am still in deep shock and pain. I didn't even have the chance to hug my parents one last time. My parents did not deserve this, were the few shattered words Romy Reiner, the youngest daughter, could utter after witnessing the tragic scene behind the villa's doors. According to the latest revelations from investigators, the case is extremely complex, involving a chain of disturbing developments ranging from Nick's threatening behavior at a Christmas party to a sudden change in his schizophrenia treatment protocol just weeks before the murders, and finally the simmering tension surrounding the will and inheritance rights, a possible motive that led him to strike his own parents. Questions continue to haunt the case. Where exactly did Rob Reiner and his wife pass away? What truly happened inside that house? And what sentence will Nick Reiner ultimately face? New details have forced investigators to reopen the entire crime scene file, revealing that this was not merely a family tragedy, but the inevitable consequence of a series of ignored warnings that led directly to a point of no return. That Saturday evening should have ended peacefully with warm Christmas wishes. According to reports, just before the tragedy occurred, Nick Reiner had attended a Christmas party hosted by Conan O'Brien with his parents. From the moment Nick appeared, however, the atmosphere felt wrong. Among elegant guests dressed in sophisticated suits, Nick showed up in a hoodie, visibly out of place. His behavior quickly became abnormal as he wandered through the room, staring at people and repeatedly asking bizarre, disorganized questions like whether they were famous or celebrities, unsettling everyone present. Investigators later described it not as drunken behavior, but as a clear loss of control. Tension escalated into a heated argument between Nick and his parents in full view of the guests, drawing attention as voices rose. Suddenly, Rob Reiner and his son left the party midway, a moment that would become their last public appearance together. Only days later, on December 14th, tragedy struck at their private home in Los Angeles, where the legendary director and his wife were found dead. The most devastating detail was that the first person to discover the scene was their youngest daughter. As Romy Reiner stepped through the living room door, she was confronted with a horrific sight. The bodies of her parents lay in an eerily silent space, the air heavy and suffocating. She froze, her body trembling uncontrollably as her mind struggled to accept the brutal reality. Her heart raced, her legs weakened, and she nearly collapsed at the scene. Only raw survival instinct and overwhelming confusion kept her conscious long enough to cry out for help. When investigators arrived, Romy completely broke down, sobbing uncontrollably and screaming in panic that it had to be Nick, insisting no one else could have done this. Although evidence was still being gathered, her desperate accusation immediately placed Nick Reiner at the center of the investigation. Romy had previously resented Nick moving into their parents' compound, a situation that brought her no peace, only deeper fear. She understood, however, that her parents had taken him in out of love, hoping close supervision could help him. That choice, made with compassion, later became a source of unbearable remorse. Before the incident, Romy had repeatedly expressed anger toward Nick and found common ground only with her eldest brother, Jake. After the tragedy, both siblings were left stunned, not because it was entirely unexpected, but because it happened in the very place they feared most. Investigators later questioned whether the argument at the party was merely a misunderstanding or the final alarm bell of an unavoidable tragedy. About a month before the incident, doctors had altered Nick Reiner's treatment plan in an experimental attempt to stabilize his mood. Instead of improvement, his condition deteriorated. Agitation became more frequent, emotions swung violently, and his behavior grew increasingly unpredictable. Reports revealed that Nick had entered and exited high-end rehabilitation facilities nearly 20 times throughout his life, sometimes falling into homelessness despite coming from one of Hollywood's most powerful families. Experts noted that substance abuse likely worsened his existing mental illness, particularly schizophrenia, which is often marked by paranoia, hallucinations, disorganized speech, and loss of behavioral control. When combined with stimulants, the risk of violent outbreaks increases significantly. In this context, it emerged that Nick was expected to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, a rare but not unprecedented defense. At the time, he was living in his parents' guest house in Brentwood, an arrangement meant to manage his instability, yet his history was already filled with uncontrollable rages and red flags. Beyond psychological issues, investigators uncovered another dark motive rooted in greed and jealousy. According to reports, Nick had long-standing conflicts with his parents over inheritance, believing he was treated unfairly and denied what he felt entitled to, despite the family's vast wealth. Over time, resentment turned into hatred. Living so close to the main house allowed him to observe his parents' routines, and the toxic combination of mental illness and obsession with money created a perfect storm. In his distorted thinking, eliminating his parents may have seemed like an extreme solution to claim what he believed was rightfully his. As evidence accumulated, the most painful question shifted from what Nick did to whether the tragedy could have been prevented if the warning signs had been addressed earlier. By December 18th, Nick Reiner was formally indicted and appeared in court on 2 serious charges. His first public appearance stunned everyone present. He looked gaunt and hollow, his face sallow, eyes cold and detached, staring ahead as if disconnected from reality. Handcuffed and shackled, he showed no emotion and spoke only 3 words during the hearing, calmly responding, "Yes, Your Honor." He did not protest, deny guilt, or display panic, even waiving his right to a speedy arraignment. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for January 7, 2026, but for many observers, that single court appearance already painted the picture of a man who had been self-destructing for years. Those close to the family described Nick as the troubled golden child, a label that followed him since youth. He displayed erratic behavior, extreme emotions, and violent rages early on, repeatedly cycling through rehab. Each return placed the family on constant alert. At one point, he destroyed his parents' living room in a stimulant-induced rage, smashing furniture and punching through walls, turning a symbol of success into a battleground. Investigators noted that Nick deeply resented his father, not only due to living under an immense shadow, but also from self-loathing over his inability to match his father's achievements. In later years, his parents no longer saw him merely as a child in need of protection, but as a deeply troubled individual, and at times Rob Reiner even threatened to force him out in moments of desperation. Public shock did not end in the courtroom. Friends and associates admitted they knew Nick was dangerous, but never believed he could kill his own parents.